For months and really over a year now, we've been talking about Rachel Zegler and the upcoming Snow White disaster because, quite frankly, with so much bad PR surrounding the star of this movie and the changes that Disney made to a classic story, a beloved animated classic, you know it wasn't going to go over well. So many people were upset about Rachel Zegler's comments and about the direction that Disney wanted to take this in. And very predictably, just as so many of us could see coming a mile away, this movie ended up being a nightmare for Disney. It's now been out 2 weekends, and as you can see, it's one of the lowest rated movies in the history of IMDb at a 1.5 out of 10. But, you know, if it was really poorly rated, if it was getting review bombed, but everybody really loves it, we promise, that it must be doing great at the box office, right? Well, it certainly wasn't the case for opening weekend. The worst opening weekend in the history of Disney live-action movies. Well, live-action animated remakes, we should say. That's not very good, even below something like Dumbo that absolutely flopped at the box office. But maybe its second weekend could save it. It'll have a great hold. It'll show all those bigots out there, all those angry men, that everyone loves Rachel Zegler's Snow White. Not exactly the case. Weekend 2 delivers even more box office humiliation for Snow White. And this is exactly what happened. Not only did it get dethroned as #1 in the box office, it was only there a week with no competition. As soon as any sort of competition came, immediately drops down to #2. Snow White at 143 million global after second frame. A working man builds $30 million worldwide bow, international box office. Yes, long story short, working man took over. Another Jason Statham, hey, just a dude who's going to kill a bunch of bad guys, just a real basic story, basic action movie from Jason Statham, took over Snow White at the box office with 1,000 fewer theaters, may I add. You want to look at the per theater count? The Chosen Last Supper Part 1 had half of the theaters that Snow White had, yet it took in nearly the same amount of money and much more when you're talking about a per theater average. It's like a lot more people interested in a classic story like that than they are in a bastardization, a modern bastardization of a classic story like Disney's Snow White. And what's really getting interesting now is, you know, they've been telling us, oh, on 200, maybe a $250 million budget, that's all it is. If you've been following this channel for the past several years, you know that that's not the case. You know, in fact, that back in 2023, it was reported that Disney had spent, by the end of 2023, $270 million on Snow White, right? That doesn't include significant reshoots. That doesn't include a lot of the post-production work. So you knew that that number was going to go up, 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 and up. And finally, you got Carolyn Reed at Forbes kind of reminding people of exactly that through the end of 2023, that $270 million was spent on this. Now, the reason they film these things in the UK is so they can get that UK tax credit. That's why they have to file these things and tell us. We don't have the amended tax documents from Disney yet to know exactly what they spent in totality on this movie. But we know that even with the significant tax break they'll get, it's guaranteed to be over $300 million. There's really no doubt about that. There's no doubt at all that they spent well over $300 million just on the production of this movie. That doesn't include the marketing costs. Marketing costs for a movie like this, let's compare it to something like Little Mermaid, right? Remake, woke remake. They spent $150 million marketing that movie. Now, I think it's safe to say that's probably what they spent on this. But even if we go conservative, say they only spent $100 million, that means you got, at a minimum, $400 million that you spent on this. It's likely a lot more. Where we're at right now, it looks like this movie might have a tough time breaking through the $200 million threshold. And let's keep in mind that these studios only get to keep around half of the box office number. Little more than half from domestic theaters, little less than half from international theaters. So about half is a good thumb rule. But look at this. That's it. Snow White will have to start charging for those pies, crashing and burning the U.S. box office. Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot grossed just $14.2 million on the second 3-day weekend, a a shocking 66.4% drop from opening weekend. Worst drop ever for a Disney live action. They go through Maleficent, Dumbo, Jungle Cruise, Haunted Mansion, Cruella. The worst drop that they've ever seen at over 66%. This movie is completely and totally fucked. Keep in mind, The Marvels, which ended at around $200 million global, that movie had about $160 million through the first 2 weekends. Rachel Zegler's Snow White is sitting at 143, significantly behind The Marvels. I tend to think it'll have a little bit better run. Some of the early estimates I've seen, and I actually think Luis Fernando put one of these out, if I can go through and find his global box office for Snow White. Here it is right here. Snow White finally crossed $100 million of global box office, a harsh 50% drop for its opening. Hits 143.1, a financial disaster with a $250 million production price tag, as we mentioned. That is not $250 million. Like, let's just go. Let's see if we can go down and just remind people, right? In 2023, this author revealed in Britain's Daily Mail newspaper that by July 31st, they had spent $133.3 million. And then the filing on December 31st, 2023, the total had risen to $270 million. That's what they had spent by the end of 2023, before reshoots, before post-production. It's significantly more than 250. It's likely well north of $300 million, even when you consider the UK tax rebate. Eyeing a $215 to $235 million global run. If that's the case, say it gets $225 million and it ends somewhere in that realm. Monumental disaster. Marvel's level of a failure. And if you really have that much money wrapped up in it, you're talking about losing potentially $300 million plus. Disney is set to lose. Let's say that again. Disney is set to lose potentially over $300 million on Rachel Zegler's Snow White. It's almost like all the time that we were talking about this, all the time we spent talking about this, how it wasn't going to be accepted, how Rachel Zegler had torpedoed this movie, how it wasn't going to be a hit, how in fact the mainstream media, the first reactors, the social media influencers who were invited there by Disney to give positive reactions, that they were all fucking lying to you, that this was a nightmare in the making, that this would always flop, that this would always fail. Looks like for the past 2 years, we've been right. In the mainstream media, the access media, the shills who lie about these things to keep their access, they've been wrong. This might go down in history as the biggest flop that Disney has ever had. And considering everything we've seen over the past decade or so, that's saying a lot.